Hello everybody, we're now going to look at the second part of lesson 2, which is what is climate change. We've already done the first objective to understand the difference between weather and climate, so we're now going to look at the final 3, which is knowing how the climate has changed in the past, to know what is different with climate change now, and to describe trends in global temperatures. So we should know that the climate is what we would expect the weather to be like at a particular place at a particular time of year, based upon historic data, so usually an average taken over 30 years. And the main components, and components just mean parts, so the main parts of the climate we usually look at and think about is temperature and precipitation. Precipitation being rainfall, snow, sleet, hail, and so on. But we can also include things such as the wind speed, humidity, and pressure as well when we talk about climate. And so as part of climate change then, we're really just looking at how these things can either increase, so they can go, temperature can increase, or the temperature can decrease, and likewise with precipitation it can increase or it can decrease. This graph is showing us how the temperature has changed over the last million years. So if we start here, this point here is now, today, at 0 years. And as we go back in this direction, we're going back to a million years before the present time at this point. And the blue parts of the line, these parts here, okay, these represent times when it was colder. And the red parts represent warm periods of time in the past. Okay, the warm parts we call interglacial. Wrong one, let's go to that. Interglacial parts. Okay, interglacial periods of time. And the blue bits we call glacial. Alright, so inter means between, so between glacial periods, and glacial is when basically we had more ice sheets and the glaciers in the world were bigger and extended longer and further. So these were colder periods of time. What this graph is showing us then is that temperature and the climate has changed significantly over the last million years. If we start at this point here, we can see that the temperature was decreasing and then very quickly got warmer, and that pattern repeats itself again, so it decreased over a period of about 50,000 years and then very quickly got warmer, and then it kind of did the same thing here, and then likewise we've got a warm period here, and then it gets colder again over about 40-50,000 years and very quickly gets warmer. It did that here and got warmer again, and here and got warmer again, and then it got colder again and got warmer again and colder again and warmer again, colder again. So this is about 150,000 years ago we had a big glacial period. Then we had an interglacial period about 100,000 years ago. Then it cooled down to the last glacial period, and the last glacial period ended about 10,000 years ago, after which the Earth has been getting warmer. Okay, so historically temperature has changed a huge amount over this last million years, going from these glacial periods, these cold periods, to these interglacial periods, these warm periods. So the change in climate is nothing new. Climate has changed and will always continue to change. So these two graphs have the world's temperatures, but on a more zoomed in scale. So we've kind of gone from a million years and we're down to 11,000 years, 11,500 years on this graph on the right here. You can see in this case the present day is on the right hand side of the x-axis, and 11,500 years ago is here. The temperature anomaly just means temperature changes from the average. So this line here at 0 is kind of the average temperature, and anything above it is warmer, anything below it is cooler. And what you'll see, coming from 11,500 years to 10,000 years ago, the world was getting warmer, and that's where we're coming out of the last glacial period into this interglacial period. And then we started a gradual trend of cooling down to about, I don't know, 150 years ago. And suddenly, very quickly, temperatures have been rising very, very fast in the last 150 years. Okay, so there's been something going on in this period here. Sometimes it's referred to as the hockey stick model, because we can see this gradual decrease in the temperature and then a sudden rise here. So it looks, if you can imagine spinning this around, it looks a bit like a hockey stick. In fact, I will try to do it here. So I'll grab this and rotate it around. There we go. That looks a little bit like a hockey stick. If we put a hockey ball here, there you can see, there we go. There's my hockey ball. There is the hockey stick model, and we can see how that pattern has changed and the trends in temperature over time. Alright, so on this graph, the time scale is zoomed in even more. All we've got here is the last 2,000 years. So here is us, the year 2000. This is going back to 2,000 years ago. And there's 200 AD, 400 AD, and so on up to about the present 2000 here. All the different color lines that we've got show different sources of evidence showing the changes in temperature over time. But you can see they generally show the same pattern. That is a gradual rise of temperature up to this little period called the medieval warm period, a cooling down to what was called the Little Ice Age around 1600, and then after that a very, very, very rapid rise of temperatures. Okay, so remember, in general the temperature was decreasing. The overall pattern was a decrease in temperature. We had a little bit of an anomaly with the medieval warm period, and then it continued to decrease afterwards until the Little Ice Age, and just past that, when the Industrial Revolution started, and then very quickly temperatures rose up in the last 150 years or so. This graph here shows the time scale zoomed in even more. It goes from 1800 here to approximately, I think it's 2009. Okay, each of the blue dots represents the average temperature for a particular year, and as you can see they go up and down a bit as we get some years it's warmer than others because obviously the weather changes from year to year. But the red line shows the averages of each 5-year chunk, which makes this nice and relatively smooth red line, which is much, much smoother than the ups and downs of the blues. So the red line is just 5-year averages. Okay, and again what we can see is that the temperature starts to rise relatively slowly here. It does a bit of a flat thing between 1940 and 1980-ish, and after 1980 it very, very quickly rises again. So we can see here the general pattern is, or the general trend, sorry, is of the temperatures rising and rising pretty quickly. So if we put all that information together from the last 20,000 years, so here's 20,000 years ago, here is us approximately, that's 4,000, so we're here, approximately here, and there's a prediction to 2100, okay, so 84 years from here, and we get something that people have termed the wheelchair model, because it looks a bit like a wheelchair. Okay, there's the bottom of it, here's the seat, and there's the backrest. Okay, so sometimes it's referred to as the wheelchair model. I'll just get rid of that so it's easier for us to see what's going on. Okay, so the green line here shows us coming out of the last glacial period. So at this point, temperatures were rising up. As lots of the ice was melting, the glaciers were retreating. And then from about 5,000 years ago, we had this gradual cooling of the Earth's temperatures. Okay, and then, starting around 1850, temperatures suddenly start to rise very, very quickly. And they're very close to becoming the warmest temperatures experienced during the last 11,000 years. Okay, climate models, so that's predictions made by scientists on their computer programs, they predict that the Earth's temperature will be greater than the warmest temperatures experienced during the Holocene. So I'll write that word down for you. The Holocene, Holocene. The Holocene is the last 11,500 years. Okay, so during the last 11,500 years, they think the temperatures we'll experience in 2100 will be warmer than any temperatures experienced during that period. Now what is most interesting, I think, is about this speed of change here. Look how rapid this change is comparing it to the speed of change here. This is really, really, really rapid warming that we've got going on here. One thing I would urge you all to go and take a look at is a fantastic animated GIF in this beautifully presented graph which some guy called Ed Hawkins has produced, and that shows the temperature change from 1850 to 2016. And what he's done very cleverly is taken each year, and then he's gone, okay, in January the temperature was here, in February it was here, in March it was here, in April it was here, in May it was here, and so on. And then he's basically joined up these dots for each year, and there would be the first year. Okay, he's then gone and done the same thing for the second year. And so when you put all of those years together, what we can see is a pattern of changing temperature from 1850 to 2016. I urge you all to watch it because I think it's actually a little bit scary about the pattern, okay, which is basically the temperature, the lines moving more and more out this way, showing a warmer and warmer global temperature. Now these temperatures here, 1.5, 2 degrees Celsius, they might not sound very significant, but this is across the whole world. The average temperature across the whole world increasing by 1.5 to 2 degrees. Okay, that's a really, really significant change to occur globally. And on the NASA website for climate, which is just here, if you want to go and take a look at it, they have some incredible infographics which show these changes. And this particular one shows the global temperature in 1884, and then I've taken one from 2015 as well. And the colours, blues show relatively cold areas and reds show warmer areas. You can see in 1884 most of the world was relatively blue, so it was a bit colder, and only a few areas were a little bit warmer, but generally kind of a bit below average. And then if we compare it to 2015, I think it's absolutely staggering. You can see most of the northern hemisphere, really, really quite warm in the Arctic, which is why lots of the ice in the Arctic is melting. Lots of parts of Australia down here getting warmer, parts of Brazil, Canada, Western Europe and Eastern Europe too, many parts of Africa, and lots of the oceans too. So this is evidence of dramatic warming, which finally brings us on to talk about what the current change in climate is known as. Okay, so we know that climate change has occurred over time. We've got these glacial periods, these interglacial periods. What we're currently experiencing is a really rapid warming of the Earth. And that leads us to a phrase which has become very, very common, and that is global warming. We are now experiencing unprecedented warming of the Earth. Okay. The big question, though, is this warming created by humans, or is it natural change? Okay, humans or natural change? And that question is incredibly important for trying to deal with the issues we are seeing around global warming nowadays. So once again, in your notes, make sure you have information and you understand the points for these three objectives: how the climate's changed in the past, to know what is different with climate change now compared to previous changes in climate, and to describe the trends, so how global temperatures are changing over time. Okay, so those three objectives, make sure you've got notes that tick off those points, because again, these are key things you guys need to understand. And that's all for this one. Thank you very much.